A few more hop on. Hopefully we'll have a few more hop on, and we are recording. And I want to welcome everybody to the monthly webinar of the Extension Disaster Education Network. And today we have a really exciting program for learning for those of us that are involved in disaster education and programming and we're going to be discussing reunification after a disaster. As we know, this is an issue that comes into play with both natural disasters and human-caused disasters. So we're very lucky today to have Carol Janssens, who is with the Northwest Red Cross, and is the mass care lead for the Northwest Washington chapter of the Red Cross. And also we have Allison Anderson, who is the Will County Emergency Management Agency director here in Will County, Illinois. And we're going to start today with Carol Janssen from the Red Cross, and I will be advancing her slides today. So Carol, if you want to go ahead and get started, I will advance when you tell me to.
Okay, next slide, please.
Okay. Well, maybe. There we go. Sorry about that.
Okay, what is the mission of reunification? It's been part of Red Cross from the very beginning. It's to have communication from outside the disaster area to inside the disaster area, to help people notify their loved ones that they're okay. Also, it is reuniting people within the disaster who got separated from the disaster. And once we find the person that we are looking for, we also, a big part of reunification is connecting them with services that they need. Health services, mental health, let them know where the shelters are, where they can go get food, whatever the person's needs are once we find them. Next slide, please. So reunification, as I said, has been part of Red Cross since the very beginning, since the Civil War, when Claire Barton helped send messages to soldiers' families that they were okay and reconnect during the Civil War. Next slide, please. So we are co-lead with FEMA under mass care. And this is emergency support function 6 is the national agreement between Red Cross and FEMA for doing reunification. Next slide. So what is reunification? Reunification is defined as provides human and technical resources to reconnect individuals as quickly as possible following a disaster. And we'll go into how we do that in the more future slides. Next slide, please. So what do? We promote family communication, planning, and preparedness. I'm not going to go into that because this is on what we do during disaster, but reunification doesn't start at the disaster. It starts in the planning phase, educating families on how to reconnect and ahead of times. So we facilitate communication inside disaster to outside the disaster. We manage requests started by family members outside the disaster area who are concerned about the well-being of a loved one inside the disaster area, especially those with the serious health, mental health, or functional needs that would make the disaster where it could lead to death if they didn't get the help they need or make their conditions worsen. We also work with military community within disasters. Next slide, please. So where do our cases come from? So they come from individuals affected by the disaster. We may have somebody in our shelter who says they're concerned about another family member who is not at the shelter. And we know that if a client is already going through the stress of the disaster, they do not need to be worried about their family or friends. Concerned family members, both inside and out. We get requests from government or partner agencies. Some of the things we do with government agencies is help with search and rescue lists to make sure that we don't have that client safe in our shelter while they're going through trouble looking for them. We get requests that are called into our local chapters, and the majority of our class cases come through 1-800 Red Cross because that's how people connect with the Red Cross. We also get requests that come from partners, public affairs, DOCs, other Red Cross functions. Restoring Family Links is the international reunification link. Our reunification is only within the United States and territories of the United States, but Red Cross does have Restoring Family Links, which does reunification worldwide. Next slide, please. So responding to welfare inquiries. Next slide. So there's 5 main, we categorize our requests in 5 main categories where we do searches for clients. General welfare, or GWI, is a non-emergency situation. So my cousin Tim is in the disaster. He's 20 years old. He's in good health, but I can't get a hold of him and I'm worried about him. We used to give the seeker information on how to find them themselves and didn't work these. We now work all cases. We do triage our cases though. Emergency welfare inquiry is our top priority cases. And those are the clients that we're looking for that have a health issue, a mental health issue, a functional need issue, that would make being in the disaster a lot worse. My mom, before she died, she was 98 years old. She had dementia for 7 years. Had I gotten separated from her, she would not have been able to take care of herself during a disaster. She would have been so confused. She wouldn't have known what to do. That's the top priority. We want to make sure that person is safe and we get them the help they need. Somebody who's on medication that requires electricity, a lot of oxygen machines nowadays that people have at home need power. The power goes out, they only have so much a reserve battery. People that are on medication that needs to be refrigerated. We also consider pregnancy in emergency welfare cases. Any medical condition, someone has a heart condition, the stress of the disaster could make it worse on them. So any of those type of things go under emergency welfare, and they're our top priority when we do our triage on which cases we look for first. They're our top. Another top priority is family reunification. The family reunification, even though it says family, what we mean by family reunification is they lived in the same house and they got separated because of the disaster. So it could be roommates. We don't care if they're legally married or it's a legal family, but if they live together in the same household, even as roommates, that goes under family reunification because they may have been evacuated. You see sometimes during hurricanes and flooding where they'll come in with boats and the boat doesn't have room for the whole family. So the dad or the adults choose to stay behind and have some of the other family members get on the first boat. Well, the next boat comes and rescues the other people. They don't have the faintest idea where their family members went. Or they could have been at work and one was at home or whatever when the disaster happened. And so they don't know where the family members are. So we prioritize trying to at least find the family member so we can get them in touch with each other. And we do try to get them back to the same location if possible. Next slide. Military welfare inquiries we could be either of the three above, but we prioritize military. And military is a veteran, a active duty, a reserve, a retiree, anybody who is the seeker is any of the above, or the sought person. So if the sought person is military, or if the person doing the looking was in the military or is active duty military, we'll work with them. And within those, we're going to triage them again. Obviously, any that fall in that category that are emergency welfare, they're going to be our top priority within the military ones. If it's a general welfare, we want to find them, but it's not going to be a top priority. VIPs, those are usually requests that come in from partners, EOCs, Red Cross leadership and things. And again, within the VIP category, we're going to triage them. We may get from Walmart may give us a list of 100 employees they're worried about. And so that would just go under the VIP category. But we would triage them the same way we would triage any other inquiry. Next slide, please. So how do we do reunification? There are multiple ways we do it. The physical deployment team, that's the team that's on the ground, in the field, doing active searches. The virtual deployment call center team, that is where the majority of our work gets done. That's where the majority of our calls come from, is from the call center when someone calls 1-800 Red Cross. If it's a minor disaster, I've actually looked for somebody in a single house fire where it was an elderly person who didn't have a cell phone, and their family heard that their house had a fire, but they didn't know where they ended up, and they wanted to get in touch with them. To Hawaii, where we had over 3,000 calls for cases in Hawaii. We had over 2,000 calls for cases in Ian. And then sometimes the reunification team will be assigned to a DR, but instead of sending them there physically, they will be working virtual, just like the call center team from home. And if they need some searches, that even though we don't have a reunification person on the ground, we'll go to the mass care team and say, can you do a home visit or do this for us? Next slide. So the reunification field team. So during a large scale disaster, we're going to send a team. It starts off with a manager, a supervisor, and 2 service associates, and builds from that. In Ian, I had at one time I had at 16 people on my field team. At the end, I had 9 people on my field team. Hawaii, the field team wasn't as big, even though it was a bigger disaster, mainly because there was no home checks to do. Unfortunately, in Hawaii, there was no homes to go and check at. Where in Florida, a large majority of the people we found were at their homes, living in them, either without power or with the roof off, or even some of the homes were fine, but they lost communication. The landlines were down. We found a lot of the people in Florida had phone service through cable companies, and the cable was out. And so they had no their landlines didn't work. The cell towers were down, and even though they brought in temporary cell towers, they weren't as tall. And so a lot of people's cell phones didn't work. And then unfortunately, a lot of people who were at home, their cars got ruined from the storm surge. And so they were stranded at home with no communication. So our teams went out to their homes, found them in their homes, and then we offered them a phone if our phones worked in their location. If not, we just got permission to share that they were okay. At the same time, we were able to find out if they had needs. Health services was a big one that we did a lot of referrals to. And they had a field team that when we gave them a name of somebody who maybe needed their prescription filled or needed something that health services could help with, they actually would send somebody to their house knowing that people couldn't leave their house. So the field teams work under a manager or a lead, and then we get technical support from national headquarters. One of the places that I found somebody, this was in Washington, fires a few years ago, was I found them through a smoke shop. So when we talked to the seeker, we get as much information as we can, found out that this woman's father goes to the smoke shop every day, and his phone service was out. And so I went to the smoke shop and talked to the owner, and when he showed up the next day, had him get in touch with me, because the smoke shop's phone worked, even though the person we were looking for, he was a mile away from the smoke shop and his phones were dead. So we were able to connect through the smoke shop. So we use whatever means we can to find people. Next slide. So we're gonna search for people with who are most vulnerable first, but we search for everyone. Another thing the field support team does is, I know a lot of people have heard of Safe and Well, which we no longer have, which will probably be coming back. But a lot of people thought Red Cross Reunification went away because our website went away. The Safe and Well, which was a public-facing website, went away. Reunification never went away. Safe and Well was just a tool that we used, and we substituted it with the helper tool, which is a registration form that we go into the shelters, we register the clients and that want us to register them, getting permission to, if someone's looking for them, let them know that they are okay. There are 3 different levels on the helper tool that the client can, let's say, one is you can share any information that we've give that's on here with whoever asks. Another one is you can just tell them I'm okay because they don't know who's asking about them and they want to make sure that they want not everyone to know. And sometimes I'll just say, no, it's for internal use only. And we're still going to reach out to that person, let them know who is looking for them and get permission to give them more details. But when they sign up on the helper tool, it automatically, we can call that person that's looking for them, say, hey, we know they're okay, or hey, we know they're in the shelter, depending on the access they gave us, even before we actually talk to the SOP person and get permission to do that. And we will go to shelters, we'll go to fixed feeding site. We now have at a lot of disasters, we'll have sites where people can come in for cleanup kits, and there'll be a mental health person there and a health service person and different centers that clients can go to. And we'll try to get somebody there to both register people and check our list of missing. We coordinate with health services, disaster mental health, and other Red Cross activities to see if they've had any touch with them. Not everybody goes to our shelters and stuff, but they may have called saying, hey, I need medication that I lost, and health services will help them. So health service will have a record of them. or they may have just called to talk to spiritual care or mental health, and we can just, so that way we can find them through them because they have a record. Another big thing that Reunification does is we provide communication for the clients. So when we go to a shelter, if we have internet, we will bring computers and they can get on to Facebook and Twitter or email their family members and let people know that they're okay or mark themselves okay on some of those things. So we also will sometimes bring in satellite phones. One of the big things that even before we had reunification on the ground, Chris Boyle, who happened to be, he's our disaster, one of our disaster coordinators for the whole Pacific Division, happened to been in Hawaii when Maui happened. And so he got a plane, he was on a different island and he got over to Maui as fast as he could. But one of the things he grabbed was satellite phones. And he took them over to Maui. So he allowed people to use the satellite phones to start calling out and reconnecting with their loved ones outside of the area. So providing means of communication for the people who are in the disasters is really important so they can just reach out to their loved ones. We educate other volunteers on what we do to let them know. And we also work with our partners during the disaster. Next slide, please. So what are our main search records methods? One is to use the Red Cross systems. We now have, and it's not on the slide because, but we now have an electronic shelter registration. And so we can just go into that system and check who's in our shelters, even before we go to the shelter, to know which shelter to go. If someone's at which shelter, we already know they're there to go and talk to them. RC Care is the system that health service, mental health, spiritual care uses and casework uses. So we can check to see if they've signed up for any services there. We will go again to all different delivery sites. We will go to hospitals. Red Cross has an agreement where during a disaster, hospitals, they're not allowed to tell us what somebody's in the hospital for, but they're supposed to tell us if we are looking for someone that they are in the hospital. And then we can go and talk to that person and get permission to share information. Home visits, as I said, that was a big thing in Florida. We did a lot of home visits in Florida. We didn't do any home visits in Maui. And then partners. We will work with our partners who may be in touch with working with clients also. We may put reunification at some of our partners locations where they're reaching out to clients and have a reunification person there, both to register them so that if someone's looking for them, we at least know that they're okay, or to see if a client that we're looking for might show up at their location. Next slide, please. So another big thing that reunification does is we work with unaccompanied minors and separated children. Unaccompanied minors are ones who show up somewhere or are dropped off at a shelter or another Red Cross without a guardian, a legal guardian. And Red Cross, we need to keep those, obviously, those children safe. So they will be separated from the rest of the general population, and they will have 2 Red Cross workers with them. Now they can be watching 10 kids or they can be watching 1 kid, but for the child's safety and everything, we always have 2 people working with unaccompanied minors. We also work with the National Center for Missing and Exalted Children and local law enforcement We do not do the search for these children's family, because even if we find someone, we don't know if they're the legal guardian or not. So we can't release, even if we have a minor at our shelter and their parent shows up and says, oh, so-and-so's my kid. They may be their kid, but they may not be the guardian. So we cannot release them to them. We have to work through law enforcement and other agencies. We put a report in with the National Center for Missing Children, and they always have field teams and any major disaster, and they will do the searching and looking for the family members and make sure that, because another horrible thing that happens during disasters is human trafficking, unfortunately. And it's also, I've had multiple calls before where I've had a non-custodian parent that uses the disaster to try to find out where their child is that they're not supposed to have contact with. So we're very, very protective of our minors. Next slide. And that is all I had. This is what I tell all my workers under me when they do it. It is when you're talking to a client, ask them if you have connected with your loved one. Do you know where you are? Do you know what your plan to reconnect is? And then we offer help to connect back. Do you need a phone to connect with your loved ones? Do you need us to help you find someone? Because we'll find people in shelter when they find out, oh, we can help them find their loved ones, and can we register you? And providing access for those people to reconnect. And that is what I have. Next slide is just questions. So if there's any questions for me? Oh, I know I had, because somehow my original slide presentation got lost. I did have a slide too that I didn't remake on what Red Cross doesn't do. What we don't do is we do not, so with reunification, one of the big things is we help law enforcement, and the fact that if everybody's calling law enforcement, they are going to be overwhelmed. Like, as I said, we got over 3,000 calls for Maui. We got over 2,000 calls for Ian. It would overload law enforcement. So we help take the stress, because if we're looking for someone, they're not calling law enforcement. But if someone's already put a missing person report in, we do not do those cases, because those are law enforcement cases. We do not want to interfere with law enforcement cases. That's number one. Number two, we never tell somebody that someone is safe, even if we find them, without getting permission from the sought person, because they may not want that person to know anything about where they are, or that even some people, I try to convince, even if they say, oh, I don't want them to know that I'm okay. Well, or where I am, well, can we at least tell them yet that you're okay? And if they say that, then at least we can close the case with telling the person that they're okay, but we can't give you any other information. If they still say, no, we don't want you to have any contact with that person at all, the only thing we can do is call the seeker back, tell them we took the case as far as we can. We're not lying to them, because we did. We just don't tell them we found them, and tell them that they can put a missing person report in. On the dead cases that we've done everything we can, we also will turn those over to, we'll tell people they can put a missing person in. The other big thing that Red Cross never ever does is notify people of fatalities. That is up to the county examiners. We are not allowed to, nor should we ever do that. But we want to know about those, because Red Cross has programs for families of deceased in disasters. There's some financial aid that's available. We have teams that reach out to those families that are usually made out of a caseworker because they give them the financial aid if they qualify. And they also give them, the team also usually has a spiritual care or a mental health or both on it, and a health service person. So they will reach out to the families to help them, once they're notified. But we do not reach out to the families until we know the notification has been met. Now, we do a lot of times find out, someone is deceased through the seeker, because when we call them on a daily, the cases we're working, we try to call them at least daily, and we tell them, if you hear, please let us know as soon as possible. They will let us know that they've heard that the loved one unfortunately is deceased. And then we know that they've already been notified. And so then we will get them, let the Red Cross condolence team know about it so that they can reach out for them. So those are things that we don't do. As far as one of the big things that Kentucky was was first time I did this on, they came to me. It was for because I went to Kentucky twice in the same year. It was for the big tornado over Christmas 2 years ago. They came to me with a list of people that were on their search and rescue list. And the reason why was, if they were sitting in our shelter, they didn't want to be looking for them, going through rubble looking for someone that we knew were safe. So those were not our cases. Those were the law enforcement's cases. But we checked, and we actually, there was like 30 some odd people on it. We found like 20 of them for them safe. And we came up with a method. If the client did not give us permission to share that they were okay, we just said, you can take number 20 off your list. And so that they knew that they didn't have to go looking through rubble for the person that person, they didn't have to worry about. So we didn't break any confidentiality and stuff, but we were able to do that. So that's an example of working with our government agencies together to do what is best interest for both the agency and for the clients. So, any questions for me?
Carol, I think you covered most everything, but the one thing I wanted to ask, because a lot of our extension staff may be on the ground after a natural disaster like that. So should we just refer people directly to the Red Cross reunification team, and how will we know where to send them in that instance?
So there's two ways to make referrals. Now the field team will work any cases that come through the Red Cross COC. So if you are in contact with the Red Cross, and usually if it, we try to have people in the government ops people in Red Cross, try to put people in the EOC, but even if there isn't one, because sometimes there's city, county, state, and FEMA EOCs, and they may not have enough volunteers to fill all those, because most of us are all volunteers with Red Cross. You can just contact the EOC, or because I know there's people in contact with everybody. So just contact them and tell them you have a reunification request, and that will get to the reunification team. I would recommend doing that rather than calling 1-800-Red Cross. Because if you call 1-800-Red Cross, if it was like Hillary, I got 5 cases for Hillary. But if it's Hawaii and I have 3,000 cases, we wouldn't want those cases to get lost among all the cases, even though I had 100 people under me. And that was just the I managed the virtual team, the call center team for Hawaii. I was the in-person person for Ian. That way the call doesn't get lost. So I would recommend for agencies and EOCs to contact us directly, not to call 1-800-Red Cross. But you always can call 1-800-Red Cross, and the call is going to get picked up.
Okay, Greg, you have a question.
Yes, thank you for your talk today. I think it's very interesting. In our county, we do have Red Cross representation in the EOC, and I can see how that can be happening. I was kind of curious about what was happening in Hawaii and looking at the different technologies that are out there. Are you looking at, you're saying social media as well as other methodologies to help find people or reunify people? Is there still a Google People Finder out there that is being used, or is that pretty much old tech now and moving on to other things?
It's still there. We use that. Our caseworkers use we'll use social media ourselves. We have to be careful when, we'll check other things. Like if we're looking for someone on Facebook, we will never put a general message to protect people. We may, if we think we found someone, we'll go into Messenger and try to reach them and see if it's the right one. Because sometimes there's a lot of people with the same name. Like in Hawaii, there was a website that was put on that was not official. And the problem with that is we confirm everything. We don't go by what was on it, because a lot of people were missing on it who weren't missing on that website. There also were people that were even put down as fatalities on that website who were not a fatality. So it was not reliable. So we used that as a tool, but we didn't take it as fact.
Okay, great. And did any of the ham operators or other radio operators help and assist in communications? We use hams in our county as a fail-safe, the last backup for communication. So if the towers go down, if the landlines are down, usually ham radios or short waves are still in operation. So did any of that happen in Hawaii as well?
Um, no, we did use it more in Guam. We did
Okay.
use it in Guam. We used some ham radios. I know up in my region, which is mostly the state of Washington, my reunification lead for my region, she actually the local ham radio reached out in King County, which is where Seattle is, to reunification. And they actually have a copy of the helper tool in case the big earthquake cascade ever happens, and because all communication will be down if that ever happens. The only thing that is a concern is how much information we can do, and when it's because of client confidentiality, ham radios is open airwaves, but we
Yeah.
do use them. So that's the big thing with it, is because, as I said, there may be people who don't want their name out there. There may be somebody, I've had it happen before, where somebody's ex that was abusive is trying to find them and use the disaster as a way. So we have to be careful, but yes, ham
Yeah.
radio is part of our plans.
Because one of the things we do is we try to prepare people and how best to prepare folks for a disaster. And the communication piece is something that we never really talk about too much about who do we call. You know, I have a family member that I call outside of my area code so that they can relay the information, because if they try calling into I'm in Pennsylvania, if they try calling into Pennsylvania during a disaster, they can't get through. Everything's tied up. So if there's a way of doing that, and then having basically a code word to verify identities, I think would be actually helpful as well. And I don't hear much about that being talked about. So
I
yeah,
didn't go into the preparedness part because I was asked to talk on what happens during a disaster, but
right,
that's part of our preparedness. When we do preparedness talk, is to have number one, have a way where, besides your phone, in case your battery goes dead, your outside the area contacts, and all families should have family members outside the areas, because a lot of time we also encourage people realize that texting works. A lot of times when phone calls won't go through, texts will still go through. So
right.
that's all part of preparedness that I didn't talk about.
Thank you.
Okay, and we're running a little over, and Allison Anderson from Will County Emergency Management Agency is going to talk to us a little bit about the reunification, and I think Allison's gears more towards not natural hazards, if I'm correct.
Yes, is my audio good?
You are good.
Okay. Well, just a quick introduction. My name is Allison Anderson. I'm the director here at Will County Emergency Management Agency. We are just outside Cook County or Chicago, if that puts any pin on your map for you. We have about 777,000 residents that reside in Will County. One of our missions, I'm going to try and catch us up on speed, so I'm going to go a little fast. One of our missions here is to help build reunification plans for our schools and our special events. So we partnered with the I Love You Guys Foundation to make this successful. And it's been a challenge for us. I'm going to walk you through some of the challenges that we've had, as well as our roadmap to getting there. So with the I Love You Guys Foundation, again, what Carol said is this begins before the recovery begins before the crisis starts, right? We are constantly in that preparedness mindset and moving that ball forward down the goal. So when the time comes, we can implement. Again, cops own the crime, fire owns the flames, and schools own the kids. So this is really geared towards the K through 12. However, this model is applicable in higher education, and it's applicable in any special events that are occurring. So we try and just use the same one for all. So that's where our tactics are, and that's how we're integrating with our local schools, our law enforcement, and our fire. Here in Illinois, our fire is also our paramedics, so those are one and the same here. We've seen a shift in changing of the language. Reunification Center has had the thought that not everyone's going to be reunified with their loved ones. So there is a push through NFPA 3000 to change it to Notification Information Center or Family Assistance Center. At the end of the day, it all means the same thing. So whether you see any of that language, it's all one and the same. It might slightly mean something different. The other thing that we're seeing, a few years ago in Illinois, we had a shooting at a parade over 4th of July. And one of the lessons learned out of that was never to use the word strong, because it victimized the victims again. They weren't feeling strong. They weren't feeling, after they just lost their community, they may have lost a loved one, injured, or a loved one was injured. When they walked into the grocery store and saw Highland Park Strong, it re-victimized them all over again. So they changed the language, and this came out of the Department of Justice as they came to help with this, to Highland Park United. So in our pre-messaging and our scripts before we even launch anything, the language is not strong. I'm sorry. It is XYZ United, and we are united as a community. It has a different feel, right? The other thing that we are working towards is no codes. We see this in hospitals and schools and you name it, and cold pinks and soft lockdowns, hard lockdowns, interior lockdowns, exterior lockdowns, just a lockdown of wing B. We're going straight to plain language. A lockdown is a lockdown is a lockdown. And that helps our first responders. Because we work very heavily on mutual aid here in Illinois, we cannot do this alone. So when one school goes on a lockdown, that means there is going to be a large law enforcement presence from elsewhere. One jurisdiction cannot handle it alone. It's going to take a lot. For your background, I was a student at Northern Illinois University in 2008 when we had the shooting there. We lost 5 people that day, and the hundreds and hundreds of first responders and fire departments that arrived on the scene was remarkable. So when we start talking about common language, it's for all of our benefits, that we're all part of this together and everyone can share the same response plans. The I Love You Guys has addressed that this terminology is changing. However, they've said that they're going to continue with the reunification language because more people are reunified than not. The concepts are, again, very similar, so they're not changing on their end, but know that the language can be interchanged. I mentioned NFPA 3000. This is the National Fire Protection Agency standards for active shooter and hostile events. It says that we have to have recovery and we have to have victim notification and reunification at the notification center. Again, all those keywords that kept coming up, right? We have to have a plan in place ahead of time. We have to do this. We have to drill and exercise this. So this is in every fire department's hands right now that they are held to this. It's also a standard for to coordinate with emergency management and fire departments on this. So when can we use this? This is really great for school, workplace, special events, because we have a confined location. As we start to transition to that whole community approach, that's where that family assistance center comes in. They're going, just like Carol said, they're going to need more than just knowing that their family's okay. It's mental health services. It's maybe they can't go to work, so they need financial assistance, daycare assistance. This is a long-term recovery aspect of any incident, whether it's an active shooter or it's a flood or tornado. A family assistance center is going to be in place for a very long time. The one in Highland Park, that shooting occurred, July 4th, 2022. It is still in existence today because people are still coming in looking for guidance and assistance. So we can apply this methodology to any situation, not just active shooter. Again, power outage, a hazmat situation, bomb threat, criminal activity, anywhere where you're going to need to move people from place 1 to place 2. We're going to need to relocate them, especially children. We want to make sure that the kids go home with the right parent, not a parent that or a family member that has malicious intent. In choosing a location, this has been our biggest struggle. Previously, all of our schools said, I'm going to use my neighboring school, or we're going to use the feeder high school. We're going to use another location. We're going to use a local community college or the college down the street. And when we work through all the logistics of it, schools don't work. They don't work as a reunification location for us because you're impacting another school, primarily in the same district. Parents have kids in multiple schools. They might be in elementary school, middle school, and high school, one or the other. And now you're impacting a school within their same infrastructure. Teachers are also impacted. This isn't just one school. This is a school community. It's very hard to say that another school is going to help the reunification process within that same district. It's a very close-knit community again. So finding another school district out a way that could help with that is more beneficial for us. We also want to keep in mind, if you are evacuating a school or any situation, those with functional access needs, those with disabilities, can we effectively get them to another location? We practice this. We are a nuclear county, so we work with our schools very closely on this process and getting them onto appropriate transportation and out of the way. However, that's not the same concept in a very fast moving environment like an active shooter. So where are they going to go and having those pre-planned out? Part of it is that situation with an active shooter is going to be over in 3 to 5 minutes. Then the crime scene takes over. Then figuring out where people have gone, that all of that is compounding, and let the crime scene be the crime scene and get those safe kids out into another location so they can be reunited with their family. Accountability. This is really where we make sure that the kids go home with the correct adult. That adult should have all that information for those students. And when they come to pick up their kid, they can fill out a little form. This does 2 things. It keeps them busy. We want them to be moving along this route. We want them to be doing something. This might be great on an app, but having them physically change their mentality to putting a name on a piece of paper will give them something to do. It's going to trigger another portion of their brain to do this activity. It's going to calm them down too. So once the parents get to this reunification area, they're going to be lining up as soon as you tell them where it's at. If it's in the plan and the parents know exactly where that reunification location is, they're going to be there before the buses get there. It is highly encouraged to make sure that law enforcement is on scene at all times. And best thing to do is keep the students out of eyesight from the parents at all costs. They should be in two separate areas if at all possible, because parents are going to want to see who's on the bus. If their kid texts them and said they're on bus XYZ, they haven't heard their friend is on that bus, other classrooms on that bus. We're also mindful that the parents that are coming may have lost a family member, their child, and that's where things get hairy, right? So the parents are going to have to go to one area, the students go into another. As the parents come in one by one, they're going to bring their little slip up to the front desk. A greeter is going to take them in. They're going to go make contact with that family member one-on-one. This is not a group effort. If that child is not there, that's when we can move that parent off to another room where notification can be made by law enforcement or by the coroner that their family member is no longer with us. That is not the responsibility of the school. It is not the responsibility of any volunteers. It is the responsibility of law enforcement. So this is kind of another way to look at that. Signage is key. The one reason why we did go with the I Love You Guys Foundation here is because all of their material is free and it's on their website. You can download it and you can have a plan in place today for something that happens at your institution, not just with schools, but even municipal and businesses as well. So just another flow. And again, media is going to be at the scene as well, and we want to keep them at bay. We do not need media sticking their microphone in a family member's face, trying to evoke emotion, which is going to impede this process. Think of it like Disneyland or the theme park that you go on vacation to. They keep us busy in those lines. Keep people moving in and out. Give them something to do. Give them an activity to complete. Make sure that you have photos of your kiddos on your phone. Make sure that you can show all this information, get that all ready to go, and have people communicate with them along the way. The one thing that we don't want to do is hide from our parents and from our community and surprise them at the last minute, because it will frustrate them. I talked about our impacted schools. It is very hard to justify that we're going to use a sister school or a school within that district to run the reunification process. Use a school far away, or use a district far away, or another agency staff. Again, use the library or a park district, something that doesn't really have that much affiliation with that particular school. Again, all family reunification, whether it's positive or negative, should be done in the outside of any other families. This is a very personal time for everyone, whether it's filled with joy or sorrow. It is very emotional on everyone, so we need to keep them and have their privacy at heart here too. Kids may not go home with what they came to school with. Same with the teachers and the administrators. They are part of the crime scene now. There's evidence, there's all of that. So knowing that that backpack might not come home might be frustrating for those little kids who feel like that's part of their identity too. So just knowing that ahead of time and being conscious of that will help. The other part is we have a large Hispanic population here. We need to take into account translators and interpreters and sign language, and make sure that all of our messaging is clear and is written for a third third grader to fifth grader level, because we just do have a lot of foreign languages here. So pictures can help. Again, what happens when the kid's not there? They're brought to a special room, one-on-one with the coroner. What we saw with Sandy Hook was all the parents who were reunited with their kids left. And then it was just the parents without children who were there. And they finally realized, after no one came to get them, after they watched all these people go in this large gymnasium, one by one, calling their names, that their kids' names were never called. And then they put the pieces of the puzzle together that their kids were not there anymore. That's a very hard realization to come to terms with. But if you can offer any support, spiritual, that's the time to do it. But again, those notifications need to be made properly. And then where do they go? Do they go to the hospitals? Do they go, can they see their kid? All of that is, again, done by law enforcement, and let them handle that. The other thing, as a parent, I know if someone said that my kid was at the hospital or had passed away and this is their location, I should probably not be behind a vehicle. So making considerations for how is that parent going to get to that child to make identification is key as well. So this is where we will transition to that family assistance center. That's where the community is really going to need to build that resiliency back. We're coming back united. All the considerations that Carol had talked about before: mental health, financial support, funeral support. In active shooter situations, the Department of Justice will help pay for the funerals of the victims. Even simple things like laundry and housing assistance. Maybe the person that left or that died was a primary breadwinner. How are we going to continue to pay the rent or mortgage if that was the case? All of those services can be provided at the Family Assistance Center. This is my version of this in my head, is like a mini mall. Everyone can go to the little booths and get assistance and at least talk to somebody and figure out if they qualify for it. The management, this is not going away anytime soon. I look at this as planning for the wedding, right? We need to schedule who's going to be there, the logistics of the entire operation. Just because all these booths are handled, that doesn't mean that the vendors are fed, that we have adequate internet, that there's adequate breaks taken, that if vendor A or resource A has a timeline and they have to be in another jurisdiction, that we can backfill them with a similar or like resource. Is there adequate parking? Is it too cold or hot in that facility? That all matters. We do active shooter training at one of our closed high schools, and the ceilings are caving in on us. Not a great location to put a family assistance center. We need a building that's going to be sustainable for a very long time. This is just a sample organization chart. ICS charts are where we typically go to for everything, right? But again, this is scalable just like every incident. But just some considerations. Having a public information officer. Holy cow. Just a few weeks ago, we went through a pretty big flood here, and having appropriate communications to the media and the public was key. Keeping people informed, and again, the families should be informed before the media. If they are learning information before the media, that's a big no-no, and they will lose trust in all of us immediately. But this is just a sample of the types of positions that could be filled. So I hope I caught us back up. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you, Allison. One of the questions or comments is, I know here in Illinois, with the new emergency operations plans, are these reunification plans also going to be required in those? And is that national or is that just the state of Illinois?
The state of Illinois is really pushing hard that we put reunification plans in our emergency operations plans. It's a very huge task to do because I have 28 different school districts with about 70 schools. So developing a reunification plan is quite challenging, right?
Yeah.
And it's not just that it's that school. I also have private schools as well. On top of daycares, K through 12, we still have early childhood to consider as well. And then we have our universities here. We also have universities like Rasmussen College, which is a for-profit college that does things completely different. So we're looking at one size does not fit all, to be honest. We have to have individualized plans for each one of these unique situations.
Is there a format that you use for those? Or you just sort of do it like you would?
We use the I Love You Guys standard. They have it all broken out on their website. It is free, it's easy. I mean, even for reunification, they have everything on an Amazon wish list. You can hit buy now, and for I think a few $1,000s, you get everything handed to you. It shows up 2 days from Amazon. It is a pretty good deal, and it costs zero. They're not taking a dime for this. So they're doing it because the founder of that lost his child in a active shooting situation in Colorado. And that was his life mission, is to make schools safer for everyone. So if you've ever heard John Michael Keyes speak, man, he will bring you to tears. I've seen grown men just buckle with him and his passion, but there's good people out in this world that are doing great work. John's one of those people doing good work for all of us in this industry. So I definitely recommend using their resources, their templates. They're easy to use, and the schools don't have to put tons of effort into it because they did it for you. You just really have to work on the training aspect of it. And that's key. And honestly, universities, your mini cities, which changes the dynamic completely. You have students coming in and going every day. You have people on campus. It changes completely. So those are all the dynamics that we're working through here. One of our initiatives is that we're becoming partners with the I Love You Guys Foundation. So they will be coming out and doing trainings across the state for everyone, both virtually and in person. So we are always happy to open that up to anyone who's interested.
Well, we appreciate that. Do we have any more questions for Allison? This has been a very, very informative webinar. And I want to thank both of you for being here with us today. And this will go up on our YouTube channel. Eventually, we'll have to add some accessibility things to it. But does anybody have any questions for either Allison or Carol?
No, but just thank you, because it opened up my eyes to a lot of different things that when they were mentioning, not letting children just go with anyone and all that sort of thing, it brings back all those things that we probably all know, but it's a great way of reminding us of a lot of those. And I really appreciated the fact of the organization that works with this. But when this goes up on YouTube, I intend to share this with our extension faculty, because even on a personal level, it's really important information. So thank you to both of you.
And also remember, we all run 4-H fairs, right?
Mm.
So, okay, well, thank you. And Kimberly is the chair of our professional development committee. Do you have anything?
Just again, thank you, Allison and Carol, for being with us today. As Connie said, this was really eye-opening, and it gives us some things to think about as extension, especially like not only fairs, but remember, we're with youth camps.
Yep.
So you never know what may happen at camp.
Mm-hmm.
We have a whole bunch of kids at camp. You never know. So yeah, this was good. And thank you so much for being with us today. And does anyone else have any questions or comments? Okay, our next webinar is March 12th, same time. And it's going to be on flood predictions. And we'll have a guest from NOAA, National Weather Service. Okay, thank you.